I'm going to demonstrate how to anneal a piece of copper. Remember, annealing is when we soften metal using heat. We are looking for a specific color. We're looking for the copper to change into like a cherry red. We're looking for a cherry red color, which is a dull red. Not a bright orange, not a bright red, but a dull red. That's when copper reaches its annealing temperature, and most of the metals that we use here in jewelry class. If you get it to an orange or a bright orange color, you're actually heating it too far and almost to its melting point. We have to remember that if we heat it that high, it could actually get brittle and not be annealed. So make sure that you're heating it to the proper temperature when you're annealing your material in order to make it the most malleable it can be. Now remember, malleable means that something is able to bend without breaking. Metal has that property. You're able to bend metal without it breaking. Glass does not. In its cool state, if you would try to bend glass, it would break. So glass is not malleable. Metal is. Now there are different states of malleable, and copper is the most malleable metal that we use here in the jewelry studio. Brass isn't quite as malleable, and nickel is even less malleable. But all of them will bend without breaking to a certain point. Now what you could do to a piece of metal is you could work harden it, which means it hardens through working the metal by hitting it with a hammer or bending it back and forth until it gets pretty much so hard that it actually will get brittle. If anybody has ever taken a paper clip and bent it back and forth until it broke, then you work hardened a piece of metal to the point where it became brittle and cracked and broke. All right, we're going to light our torch, same way as we always light our torch. We are going to set it here on the igniter, and we are going to turn that on until it lights. And then we're going to turn our torch up. You can turn it up as high as it'll go, because we're not worrying about whether or not solder is going to fall off or anything like that. We are just trying to heat the metal to a cherry red. And we're going to notice that the metal is going to start to darken and get grayish in color. And then copper sometimes shows some other colors like blue, purple, green. And then all of a sudden you'll notice that it'll start to become reddish in color. And at this point you're seeing that. Now if you overheat it, this is what I was talking about. If you overheat it, it will turn really bright orange. And that is not what we want. That's actually making the metal more brittle, and it could melt the metal. So if you accidentally heat it to that temperature, just bring it back down to annealing temperature. Heat it a little bit more. Once it's annealed completely, you can take that, pick it up with the copper tongs, bring it over to the water, and quench it in the water. Now at this point, it has been annealed. And now we're ready to start making our jump rings. There is some oxidation on here, so if you need to, you can pickle the wire. Once it's pickled, you can also sand it to try to keep, to make the metal a little bit smoother before you make your jump rings. That way it looks a little bit nice and more finished, because that's ultimately why we're annealing this piece of metal, is to make our jump ring.